Welcome to our second panel of the day, the Entrepreneur's Executive WoW panel. I'm Taryn Grome, editor and co-founder of PharmaVOICE magazine. To kick off this exciting panel, I'd like to offer up a quote from the ever-eloquent Maya Angelou. I love to see a young girl go out and grab the world by the lapels. Life's a bitch. You've got to go out and kick ass. Miss Angelou might as well have been talking about our four panelists this morning, who have all gone out and kicked tail as entrepreneurs, chief executives, founders, and all-around inspiring leaders. I'd like to introduce our panel today. Kathy Giusti, founder and chief mission officer, Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation. She's also faculty co-chair, HBS Kraft Precision Medicine Accelerator at Harvard Business School. Dr. Linda Marbán, president, CEO, and co-founder of Capricor, Inc. Dr. Sharon Shacham, founder, president, and chief scientific officer for Karyopharm Therapeutics. And Wendy White, co-founder, RareiTi. During the next hour, we're going to dig into the aha moments that led to their starting their organizations or companies, what excites them about the startup environment, and how they keep the momentum going, what it's like to be an N of one in the boardroom, and how we can continue to break down those barriers, and the wow moments that change their lives and career trajectories. During the panel, please feel free to use the chat function to log into your questions, which we will get to at the end of the session. To start the conversation, I'd like our entrepreneurs and panelists to share the 2 or 3 words that describe their like a boss leadership style and why. Kathy, I'm going to start with you. Good morning. Kathy, you're on mute.
Thank you so much for having us, Taryn, and for organizing all of this. The first panel was awesome, and I'm so happy to be with amazing women on the second panel. With regard to leadership, the first word that always comes to mind for me, and I am an Adam Grant protege, I would say, but is really all about purpose. And I think for me and all of us at the MMRF and even at HBS, the focus that we have and the purpose that we have is caring about the patients that we serve. And I thought Deborah Dunsire did a really nice job about talking about that earlier this morning too. But at the end of the day, I think being a patient and working with patients day in and day out, you kind of know that gut-wrenching feel of, oh, I've got cancer, I've got Alzheimer's, I've got whatever disease, and how challenging that can be. And our mission is to make sure that we find them the best drugs in that disease. And when we work toward finding new business models, that we find those and share them as well. So first word is definitely lead with purpose. The second one, I think, is a bit unique in terms of personal situation, and that is urgency. Mm-hmm. So it never leaves me that I still live with a fatal disease today. I mean, it's many years later since that diagnosis, but multiple myeloma is still considered fatal. And I think as a result of that, and as a result of always talking with patients who are looking for that, the next therapy, I feel like I'm always about speed. And that speed allows us to often be first, in terms of our new models, like develop the first tissue bank, develop the first consortium, sequence the first genome. And so I think that urgency has probably served us well. So I would summarize by saying the 2 leadership things I think are most important are purpose. It's also have urgency. And then one thing I'll just add on is always share the progress with your teams, because if you are making progress, it allows them to stay with you and you keep feeling that momentum continuing to roll.
Excellent, Kathy. Thank you so much. And we're going to dig into your story a little bit more detail in that next section. But you do lead a purposeful and urgent life, and you have been at the forefront of so many firsts in the industry. So thank you for your contributions that have impacted so many others in the life sciences. Keeping with our alphabetical order, Linda, I'm going to turn to you.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me. It's a true pleasure to be part of this incredible group of women, and it also gives us a chance to reflect on our own selves. I don't do a lot of mirror looking to sort of think about me. I think mostly about the 2 words I'm about to say, which are team and focus. So I'm a good to great Jim Collins protege. It's what actually led me to the biotechnology space, was reading that book and sort of thinking about what I wanted to do with my life, with my PhD, with my science. And I believe very strongly that you surround yourself with people that not only are smarter than you, but that are also willing to share their ideas and build with you. And I find it's so invigorating to bring people of different areas of the company together and hearing their opinions on something that is not really, in their strike zone, but from 30,000 feet, they really can give you a different perspective or see a whole from a different way. So team, it's all about the team, all about the people you surround yourself with. And focus, which I guess is the same as purpose. I was thinking about that as Kathy was speaking. It's sort of a synonymous word, right? It's deciding what you want to do, keeping your eye on that ball, and just keep going after it. And I guess I'll add again, following in the laudable footsteps of my predecessor in speaking, the other is persistence and resilience. So the chairman of our board always makes fun of me by saying, he's never known anybody more resilient than me. Just keep, no matter what happens, I pop right back up. And I think probably everybody here will echo that really is what defines an entrepreneur. You have to sort of take that, fall over and land on your face and stand up and say, well, that didn't hurt that much. Let's try this again.
Yes.
So just to summarize, team, focus, resilience, and persistence. Thank you so much.
Excellent. And we'll give you a mulligan on the extra two.
Yeah.
They were excellent too. Sharon, I'll turn to you.
Hi, and thank you, Karen, for inviting me for this great panel. So for me, especially in pharma, one of the most important things is to be able to dream, because the goal is so far, especially when we start, and so big that you have to, at difficult time, you still have to keep this dream and keep this image of your dream that allows you, when it's hard, to have it. For me, it was meeting a patient, and I get the pleasure of doing it today again, but it always seeing the first patient that actually gets selinexor and is doing better. And that's a picture that I always keep in mind. However, dreams are good. Dreams cannot come without execution. So it's about execution every day. We come from, all of us have science background, and we love to put big theories, and we like to put excellent plan, and we like to meet with consultant and debate. And I think we like to profess, but it's about execution. Just make a decision and run with it. And many times it's the wrong decision, but it's still movement, and you learn from everything you do. So, okay, you want this path, let's just do it. And the third part is that probably has to do more with my training in the Israeli army, which is to lead by example. We are, myself and the rest of the leadership team, we are always in the trenches with the employees. If we have to stay overnight because FDA needs something, the last person to turn off the light in the company will be a C-level person. And I will never ask anyone to do something that I'm not doing there with them. And I think that creates an environment of togetherness that is very important when you have such audacious goals as to develop a new drug.
Thank you. And I love the fact that it's about the dream, and it's about that goal, and it's about finding that next therapy for that patient in need. That's fantastic. Wendy, I'm going to, one day we're going to go in reverse alphabetical order.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, so thank you. It's so exciting and interesting, of course, to come behind all of my distinguished panelists. And I think all of us are talking about sort of a similar style. For me, I'm definitely purpose-driven. I totally believe that. But when I was thinking about my leadership style, it's like taking that purpose and being the motivator, sort of the chief cheerleader, and also a servant leader. That's really how I think about it, is trying to hire the people that are smarter than I am and then keep them all focused on the same goal. So really tying into a lot of the same ideas that you guys have all said, that's how I think about it. is that you listen to, you hire the right people, you listen to what they're saying, and then occasionally, because you have the inevitable ups and downs and you need that persistence, you can dive in there and refocus everyone on the vision and the goal and the purpose, and be that motivator to keep everybody going.
So I love that chief cheerleader, because you're also the chief bottle washer. You're also the chief. Just that the other thing as an entrepreneur, especially as you're just starting off, and I can relate completely with that. So you all are very inspiring leaders, and you're successful entrepreneurs. Let's talk about starting the company. It's not easy, taking that leap out of what could be comfortable, or in some cases out of necessity. Kathy, I'm going to share with you, and let's talk about that aha moment that led you to take that leap. You touched on it a little bit earlier, and it was that urgency piece. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Right. So it's very interesting that, it was over 25 years ago that I was diagnosed with myeloma. And I want to remind you, Taryn, that, when I was at Harvard Business School, I literally took a low pass on entrepreneurial management, thinking I will never be an entrepreneur, that I loved working at big companies. But 25 years ago, when I was unexpectedly diagnosed with multiple myeloma, they told me I had, 3 years to live. I was 37 years old. My daughter was 1 year old. My son hadn't even been born yet. And there were no ifs, ands, or buts. And back then, myeloma was 100% fatal, and that was the lifespan. So at that point, I really started to look at, well, what do I want to do to extend, my life long enough to at least see my 1 year old go to kindergarten? And that was my dream, to be honest with you. And from that came the development of the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation, which, if you think about it, Taryn, we've been together a really long time, and that was a long time ago, but we were one of the first research foundations ever. And I would say my best friends out there were probably Bob Bell at Cystic Fibrosis and Debbie Brooks at Michael J. Fox. And I think together we really tried to change the nonprofit sector. But it was, as you said, a stretch. I mean, I had always worked in big pharma and big companies. I had worked at the Gillette Company. I had worked at Merck. I was running worldwide operations for Searle when I was diagnosed, now part of Pfizer. And I was used to having these really, really big teams. And now all of a sudden, I am one woman at a desk, out of our bedroom, in our home. And every decision is mine. I don't have sounding boards. And to get things up and running, it's an entirely new world to be an entrepreneur in a space like that. But I will say that based on looking back and saying, what did we do in terms of developing research foundations, I think many of us changed the scope of them. And now I think when we look at groups like the MMRF, we are a doer organization. I think my being a patient and having a window seat and looking at the healthcare system and knowing it was broken allowed me to find new models that we didn't just fund, but that we designed and developed to change the world of myeloma forever. And as a result of that, working with the entire myeloma community, because it wasn't just us. Today we can look back and say, at the MMRF, we did build the first tissue bank, sequence the genome, conduct many clinical trials, and help get a number of drugs launched. So 13 drugs approved, and a tripling of survival is amazing. But then I think the other aha moment is, and we can talk about this later, Taryn, but was the aha moment of when my sister was diagnosed with breast cancer, my mom with melanoma, and the dean of Harvard Business School called and said, would you share everything you know with as many diseases as you can? And I couldn't think of a better way to spend the next number of years of my life than sharing everything we could in terms of best practices.
Hey, Kathy, it's wow with you. There's so many wows. But you are a doer organization, and you have changed the face of that disease for so many. Yeah. So that's just remarkable. And I love that your dream of seeing your 1 year old has now become a dream of seeing your grown children now do what they're doing in their lives. So that's really living the dream, and that's fantastic. So thank you for sharing that very personal story. Wendy, I'm going to turn to you because you had a pivotal wow moment in a similar vein where you were confronted by an unexpected health issue. Tell us.
Yeah, so I actually went to school for technology. So I was, and I had started a digital marketing firm in the 90s. And we were amazingly already working in rare disease brands. When my third child was born in 2001 and she had issues and we didn't know what it was. And I spent 2 years trying to get her a diagnosis, visiting doctors all around Chicago, scouring the internet, reaching out to anyone I could think who could help. I eventually tracked down a geneticist at Johns Hopkins who confirmed a lot of the research that I had done. And when I asked who I should go see in Chicago, he told me, oh no, there are no specialists there. And so I like to say, yeah, I went back to Dr. Google, which I know is, but it just made me think about
Dr. Mom.
Yeah, there you go, Dr. Mom. Well, except that not really. I mean, but it did make me think about the power of the internet, who we trust, what lengths of people will go to work with their time, their talent, and their treasure for their children. And just like Kathy said, it also was clear to me that the system was broken, especially for people who don't fall into sort of the regular pathways. And my child has a connective tissue disorder, which means that we had to see specialists who have we had to see, pediatric orthopedic surgeon, optometrist, geneticist, rheumatologist, a whole series of doctors. They're not trained to talk to each other. So it puts the caregiver in a position where they have to give themselves, they don't become a doctor, but they have to give themselves a lot more knowledge if they want to do the best for their child. And 60% of rare diseases are pediatric. And this whole experience for me, it made me realize not only that, this was right in front of me and I was sort of equipped to make this my life's work, but that we really needed to think about this in a completely different way and bring more patients and caregivers and to think about the influence they have and how they communicate and who they trust into how we work collaboratively to drive everything forward in rare disease. So I just changed the focus of my company and went from there to really think about how do we, instead of sort of the traditional thing of hiring sales people and launching drugs right at the end, that we really think about working with and collaborating and communicating in a much more transparent and urgent way.
Well, you have become one of the most foremost experts in that rare disease space, and you served, 2 or 3 years as chair of Global Genes, where you had an incredible influence there as well on this community that so needs therapies and drugs. As you said, 60% affect pediatric patients, but there are more than 7,000 rare diseases that still need to be addressed. And this is, Siren, when you switched your pivot, that was your first company, but now you started a second company, RareiTi, excuse me, that a little bit later. So you're a serial crazy person. So I'm just saying. Sharon, you also are a serial entrepreneur, and you also have a background in technology similar to Wendy. Talk to us about how all of that led to your starting up Capricor Karyopharm. And I know you have a drug discovery model that you're interested in talking about.
Well, my eureka moment seems so boring compared to the other two, but I'll do my best.
It's not boring at all.
But I always knew that I want to be a chemist. I read about Marie Curie when I was probably 10, and being the nerdy person that I was, discovering something that didn't exist before always seems to me like an amazing thing to do. I did my undergrad in the chemistry school at Tel Aviv University, and then my PhD was essentially in building. I was in computational biophysics, so that's the technology part, and I was building models that allow to create a three-dimensional model for protein that did not exist before. The beautiful thing about this is that then you kind of have a vision of the lock, and you can develop new keys, which are essentially drugs. So it moves a lot of the element of drug discovery that are very slow and expensive into the in silico, into the computer. And This was all at the beginning and the 2000. Now you can do it on a on a PC or Mac. But back then, when I started to do it, we needed all these very, very big computers that only the university used to have. Based on this PhD thesis, this was the beginning of my first company that essentially took it into the next step and used these models that we built with the algorithm I developed in the PhD to identify new drug candidate. And we had 6 programs mostly in CNS, Alzheimer, which was a big passion for me because my grandma unfortunately died from Alzheimer's, but also in anxiety, depression, obesity, schizophrenia, and other. And that I already did with my mentor and my partner for life, Michael, who is also the CEO of Karyopharm. This company eventually died because of or shut down because of a phase 3 study that failed in anxiety and depression. We all ended up with anxiety and depression from doing studies in anxiety and depression. It's a very difficult field. I will get back to that field one day. But I thought that I want to do something that in oncology, and Michael was already involved developing Velcade and then developing carfilzomib, 2 drugs that the MMRF helped develop for about 7 to 10 years ago, a little bit more than that. So he was already working, and I met all of them even before I started. I met Kathy and others before I started Karyopharm. But so I would come up and saying, I want to do this and I want to do that, and every dinner it was the same. No, this is a bad idea. No, don't work on this photo. And I knew I wanted to work on one of the pillars of cancer. And then I came up I remember that evening when I said to him, what if we can modulate what comes in and out of the nucleus? Working on the nuclear core complex. And Michael is not one that, you will find him without words. I remember maybe 3 times like that in my entire life. That was one of them. And he was silent and he said, well, that might work. And since that was the real beginning of Karyopharm, once we identified this as a target, I moved to really start understand the biology and start using a version of this algorithm that was I did part of my PhD to identify small molecule inhibitors for XPO1.
Oh, Sharon, thank you for sharing that. And I can't imagine how those dinner conversations went. Had to be quite fascinating. No. Yes, that'll work. So congratulations to you and the work that you're doing there.
And Terry, can I just say she's just being incredibly humble.
Yes.
Because what she and Michael have accomplished at Karyopharm and how they've worked with us together at the MMRF, you can hear the passion in her voice. Like, thank God she was looking at disease, but her background was more on the chemistry side. I'm always looking at everything from a business standpoint. But relationships come together and trust develops. And I think, Michael knew the MMRF, we knew Michael and the team. And as a result, myeloma patients got a really amazing drug that was filling an incredible need, of unmet need for our patients. And so we're grateful. We're very grateful.
I love when worlds collide like this. This is fantastic.
Thank you, Beth.
Linda, I'm going to turn to you now. I mean, Capricor has had an incredible journey. You've had several lives already, and it's still a pretty young company. Talk to us about your journey.
When we talked originally about what some of the topics of the panel were going to be, I really have spent the last couple of days thinking about the aha moment. And I don't necessarily think that there was one aha moment. So I was working for a biotech that had been a spinoff of Johns Hopkins University, where I had postdoced and done some of my early faculty work. And then my then husband and I, Eduardo, were at a meeting in Capri in Italy, and I met this incredibly dynamic scientist. Her name was Elisa Messina, who had a hand-drawn poster of these cells that seem to heal heart attacks. And I'm always sort of the headlamp. So I I grabbed Eduardo and I said, you really should take a look at this woman's work. I think it's really interesting. And he looked at it, and similar to the story that Sharon just described, he's a very big skeptic and can always find a way to shoot holes in ideas. And he went and looked at it, and he sort of said, I think this is interesting. I think this could work. So he invited Elisa and her husband, Alessandro, to his lab at Johns Hopkins to work on understanding these cells and whether, there was a there, so to speak. And as the curtains parted and we began to see the promise of the cells, we also realized from my experience working for this little biotech that I was in that you need to start a company to wrap up the intellectual property, and you need to sort of put it in a little box so it can be developed. And that, I guess, if we want to sort of talk about it, that was sort of the aha moment in the sense that I just, dig in and get done what needs to get done. And I went, okay, we need to found a company. Okay, we need to wrap in this intellectual property and we need to sort of see where this will go. And all I can say is that I just kept putting one foot in front of the other, doing what had to be done next. I became impassioned about the cells and cell therapy, but it was also during a time that regenerative medicine was just starting to get a haze over it that was really casting a pall over the whole space. Do cells work? Myself. Then there was a variety of other issues, mechanism of action. They didn't work like a real pharmaceutical could ever work before, even antibodies, which was a biologic. And then, sort of on top of that, there were several fails in the space, largely probably because of sort of poorly designed clinical trials, but none of us knew that then. And, as I spoke a few minutes ago about my leadership style, really it's a personality style. I'm just pretty resilient. And so I continued to believe that we could move this forward. So I found alternative ways to fund the company. We couldn't get venture capital money, so I found philanthropy money. We built a good round of angel investors. We moved the company to California so we could take advantage of the regenerative medicine fund, the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine at the time. Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where we ended up landing, incubated the company and still have lab space there, more than a decade later. And so they continue to provide an incredibly good home for us. And we just kept building. And, when I took over as CEO of the company, it was private, and we had our first clinical data. And I took over as CEO for 6 months. I was going to run this company until we found somebody, they call them the White Shoe Group in Boston. Kathy, I can see your face, but you're probably smiling. So they were going to find a real CEO. I recruited people to be on the board of directors that I think would be credible representatives of building a regenerative medicine company. And that was 11 years ago. To be clear, I didn't have an actual signed contract as CEO, I think until 2019, 9 years after I took over the company. And that was because, we were still just in growing mode, and we were going to, find when I got it to the point that it was going to be suitable to take over by somebody else would take it over. And in the meantime, we did 5 clinical trials, had several fails, rebooted again, decided also to pursue rare disease. We work in Duchenne muscular dystrophy, where we have really beautiful clinical data in 2 clinical trials. And so I've gotten to know the advocacy groups really well, the patients, the families, everything that my colleagues on this panel have talked about is, one of the main motivators of getting up and going to work every day for me is to know that I could potentially someday make a difference in the life of a human being who is somebody's son, somebody's brother, somebody's husband. And for those of you that don't know, Duchenne muscular dystrophy is primarily a disease in men. It's not that I'm just focusing on the Y chromosome aspect of this. It's almost all exclusively in boys that it is a genetic disease. And then we rebirthed the company just about a year ago. We had discovered as the mechanism of action of the cells that exosomes were mediating the mechanism of action. I can't go into the science right now, but it's really exciting science. We decided that exosomes would be the perfect delivery vehicle for nucleic acids. And so now we've shifted focus away from regenerative medicine to the idea of taking an exosome, loading it with RNAs, and using it to treat diseases of inflammation, fibrosis, infectious, hopefully oncology at some point. So really exciting times. And all I can say, and I'm sure my colleagues will nod their heads in agreement is it's never a boring day when you're an entrepreneur. It's always exciting.
Well, it's good to see you grew into your real CEO role. So that's amazing. And I think the science that you're doing is so elegant right now. And I think that it is really cutting edge and breakthrough. So it's going to be exciting to see where you take those exomes and how they're going to progress down the pipeline, because I think there's really exciting stuff there. Sharon, you all have been in the startup environment now for quite some time, and I can hear it in your voices. There's a real passion behind getting in there and being resilient and being the chief of everything, yet being collaborative at the same time. So let's talk about why startup is so exciting for you, and how do you keep that momentum going? And even though some of your organizations are older now and more mature, there's still that piece of it. And you still have that entrepreneurial spirit about you all. It's part of your DNA. I can see it and I can feel it. So Sharon, let's talk about that. I mean, I know you've alluded to it a minute ago about your experience from the Israeli army. What kind of insights does that give you as you move through your journey as an entrepreneur?
That we can do much more than what we think we can do. That if we put our mind to it, almost anything is possible. And the idea that we can, it's this resilience that is, I think, gets built into your bones, and that there is no goal that is high enough. And I think the other part is the urgency, and I think the third part is this essence of safety, that you have to take care of the safety in this case of our patient, of their well-being, of that they can continue their life. I think nothing is taken for granted. Mm-hmm. And I think that's how we run the company. It's very focused. When you create something that never existed before and you give it to a patient, mm-hmm. I think we talk a lot about patient and love to hear what the others are saying, but the part that is, for me, is amazing is this courage to take something that didn't exist for the sake of science, because usually they start with doses that are low and their chances to work are small, and really giving us an opportunity to promote the field. Mm-hmm. And knowing that they are our ultimate partner to develop new drugs is the way we run the company in every aspect that we do. It's not an easy journey, but it's a very humbling experience, and we try to have patients talk to us about our experience, because the day is long and I didn't this, and this hospital doesn't let us do what we want, and this doctor doesn't understand what we want. But at the end of the day, what it is compared to our patients. So that's one thing that I get from the Israeli army is the understanding of the big problem that we are here, and that we have to continue fight. That it's a good goal, and you fight for your good goals.
And the dream of doing something for patients that they don't have an answer to right now. So, thank you for.
I think that comes back to like what everybody's saying on the line, which is really, I find fascinating, is you're hearing from all of us. It may have been a child, it may have been a parent that had Alzheimer's, it may have been yourself, no matter what it was. I think we all, and this is the beauty of working in healthcare, right? We all migrated to a space that we cared about, that would have purpose to us. I think maybe some of us came as reluctant entrepreneurs. I know I was a reluctant entrepreneur, but I think what's happened is we've all become serial entrepreneurs. And the reason for that is because the science and the technology is truly our love and is what's changing the world. I think for most of us, we would probably agree the science and technology is phenomenal. The system is broken, and we're always constantly trying to find entrepreneurial ways to fix it or go around it. And so I think when you hear people talking about what's happening in the science in Duchenne's, what's happening in immunotherapy and oncology, like for us as entrepreneurs, we have to start with a blank sheet of paper and say, Where's the science going? Where's the technology going? Where's the gap that our organization can play to accelerate drug development? And once we do that, who are the partners that would be the absolute best to do that with us and to accelerate progress? And I think that's what makes entrepreneurs tick is, you start to look at the science, you start to build the models to address it. And then, as everybody's saying, you keep talking to the patients. And I think you hear it from them directly firsthand that you changed their life, that you saved their life, that they saw whatever it is that they so desperately wanted to see. And I think that's the gift that you're trying to give all of your employees to keep them motivated.
Agree.
And let me just add, I think it's the science, but it's not just the hard science, it's the social science.
Mm-hmm.
We're changing the way we all communicate and thinking, and I really believe that thinking about patients also as partners, bringing them in. I mean, obviously, patients come from all walks of life, and they're going to do, like I said before, they're going to do whatever. So really not othering them, not doing it for them, doing it with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And especially as we move forward and think about the ways that we're all communicating and interacting.
Yeah. And Sharon, I would say that having worked in the nonprofit sector for, quite a while, it's not we're the sexiest place to be. So, that has challenges in itself, right? Because there's thousands and thousands of nonprofits. Some are incredibly good at what they do, and others are still struggling out there. So I think in today's world, especially going back to what Wendy was saying, is you have to figure out how you work with your partners, because technically what we try to explain to our patients is we need your samples, we need your data. We do want our biotech partners to have access to information from us, because I don't know how else we would possibly validate targets and inspire the other incredible women on this panel to come to our diseases and help find cures. And so I think it becomes really important for patients to understand that they are part of the solution, and that industry is not the bad guy here. These are incredible women on this panel right now that have given up, a lot of time and energy to help cure these diseases. And they need our samples, they need our data, they need our stories. And the more we partner beautifully with them, the faster we will find cures.
I completely agree. I would like to add in between these two, the social technology, what it also allows us now is through all the regulated system to get access on a daily basis to the patient. So with digital health, we can also understand, and I'm talking here, for example, on the side effects profile, the daily experience of our patient. The putting side effects as grade 2 or grade 3. What does it mean for someone to have nausea, 7 days a week? It's hard for someone that is not sick to understand that. And is it in the morning? Is it at night? Is it coming away? I'm just giving one example. And today, with the advantages that the advancements that we have in technologies that gives us direct feedback, we can actually optimize and create better drugs for patients. So again, it's putting, like Kathy, like you said, it's putting the patient as part of the solution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
There are no enemies in the ecosystem. It's all good people, Taryn. There's really good people that work in healthcare and they care.
Absolutely.
It's just a bad system. The incentives aren't aligned, and it's not helpful. And I think we're all trying to work our way through it. I think COVID shed a big light on it, though, so that probably helps us.
Yeah.
I guess to add to sort of that three-legged stool approach of, the companies, the patients, we can't go without talking about the regulators. And, I think that a lot of blame goes to industry that should be focused on how the regulatory process is done, how the regulators see drug development, and how a lot of cases, and the rare disease community is doing an incredible job of highlighting this. I know some of the Duchenne advocacy groups, especially Parent Product of Muscular Dystrophy, have done an extraordinary job of highlighting the patient experience, and we have a compound, CAP-1002, that works. Our data is incontrovertible. 2 clinical trials have shown the same thing. And we keep going back and forth with the regulators about approval. And it's not just, I'm not just trying to trumpet, my own drug. It's just the one that I know best. And I sometimes feel like if I had a child with this disease and I knew that, he could take something that was safe and could potentially improve his cardiac function, which was the #1 cause of death in my disease space, would I, run over hot burning coals to get that therapy for him? Yes, I definitely would. And a lot of times what people don't realize is those hot burning coals is the regulatory bodies, where they seem out of touch with, what the mandate really is. It's become very bureaucratic over the 30 or 40 years that the regulations have come down. So it's a little different. I see from a different perspective. Sorry, I'll just finish up, and from the advocacy group perspective, you're trying to just get, things into patients. We'd like to see them get to all patients, and we'd like to see that regulatory communication become much more open.
Yeah, which is interesting.
If you don't mind, I would like to push you back a little bit about this. It's not that Karyopharm had the smoothest path with FDA and other regulator. We didn't. But what I found at the end, and we had a negative ODAC, and for those who doesn't know what it is, an advisory committee that is on public TV. It's one of the most public experience a company can have. And at the end, they vote. It's an advisory, and they vote, give advice to the FDA whether they vote yes or no, and they voted no, which is one of the toughest moments in my career. And this is for our first indication in patient with pentarefractory myeloma. But we came out of this, and the FDA continued the dialogue. They actually talked to us. They told us what they heard. They told us what they heard they don't like. They told us what they heard that they like. And they continue with this. And I always felt that at the end of the day, they do understand that their mandate is to bring new solution to patients. Not always that we see the entire picture, and not always we understand where they are coming from. And I know it's not always also the case, but in general, we learned a lot from FDA and from our other regulators in Europe and others. And I do think that they do want to do what we are paying them our taxes for. And the dialogue with the FDA is very important. And transparency always helped us. And it wasn't always easy, but they made the company better, and they helped developing selinexor. They also, during COVID, when we did a study with COVID, we got responses from FDA, EMA every 24 hours to start the study. We started from an idea, which was March 10th, to a first patient was April 10th. Wow. In 1 month, we got an 8-country study up and running, which speaks to what Kathy said, that the system is broken because you can do a study in 1 month. It's just you need to align all the incentives, and they are not aligned. So a lot of what Linda, I think I agree there are issues with the regulatory team. It's maybe more bureaucracy and time. They have more time than us. They don't understand what time is for biotech. But I believe they want the best for patients. Absolutely.
But you may find that it's different. Like, one of the things I think that we love working on up at the Harvard Accelerator is going across diseases, because, what you find in oncology is really good at precision medicine. It's good at data. It's, we've got a lot of it down, not just at the MMR. Many cancers are doing this quite well. And then you look at some of the other diseases and they're still struggling with that. And I think the whole point is we can share best practices with each other. I think, the people at FDA that are doing really great work, whether it was COVID or oncology, can share best practices with the other groups to say, why are, like, all of us in oncology, we love FDA. And that doesn't mean that, a lot of times it's just who's in the spot, who has the position, how much have we all coached and trained and worked with these amazing people. But what I find that we don't share our own best practices across diseases nearly as well as we should. And we could probably save each other a heck of a lot of time knowing why precision medicine moves in oncology and what it could mean for, neurological disorders or for rare disease. And we have to come together more.
Thank you, Kathy, because I think that was far more eloquent than I could have stated it. But oncology and the regulatory world is treated very differently. And it's one of the reasons why, cancer medicines have moved forward so much faster than other types of medicines. And I think exactly as Kathy said, the regulators can learn from the experience in oncology, but for some reason, there's this rarefied space. Maybe it's because cancer is such a scary problem. Other diseases, that type of interaction. And I think they just need to make it a best practices kind of.
Well, part of the problem in rare diseases is just what I was talking about before. The FDA is not, the experts aren't all in the same area. So it depends on which group you go to, which is why they have the Office of Orphan Products at the FDA, but it's still not at the same level as all the other departments. So if you go in with a rare disease, you might have to bring in experts across different specialties in order to get the right group in the room. Whereas oncology, I think they're just ahead, right? And there's a more collaborative, there's a path to treatment. You don't have all these different areas that you have to bring together. So it's something that we have, but we absolutely should learn, Kathy, from what you were saying. We absolutely have to learn and collaborate and think about that. And think about how we train people in medical school too, and how to collaborate and how to really not have to be the expert and for doctors, and to really think about how we all learn, how we all come together, and how the regulatory process even works. I love Linda, Pat Furlong, I know her pretty well, and I love, she says, patients don't have patience. And that's how we should all live.
Exactly, with that sense of urgency and that sense of purpose as we started out our conversation today. We have about 5 minutes left before we're going to open up for our attendees to ask some questions of you all. So I would like to end with your wow moment, since this is our Woman of the Week virtual panel. And I'm going to start in reverse order. And Wendy, I believe you already touched on this a little bit in terms of what changed the trajectory of your career. And so tell us a little bit more about Casey and your wow.
Yeah, well, I was actually going to say my wow moment, which still is about Casey. But it happened when I had to think about this, but it really happened when I had to, when I wasn't just living my caregiver story, but when I had the opportunity to talk about it in front of 1,000 women at the HBA. So deeply personal, no PowerPoint slides, it was very stressful. I had to be on stage with Frida Lewis Hall, who is like an amazing storyteller. And just be completely vulnerable and talk about it. And it made me sort of, instead of just being in the moment, which is what you do when you're faced with a problem. And as I was walking through the journey with Casey to try and find her, whatever the next thing was, it was going to make her better, but to sort of be able to step back and talk about that whole thing. And two things happened out of that. One is a lot of people came up to me afterwards, and actually for a long time afterwards, and would share their stories with me. And the second thing is, it just made me think about it more from that perspective of if this is what people are experiencing with our broken healthcare system, then this is and that how we operate needs to change, and how we collaborate and how we think. And that was really, I guess, a wow moment for me is what I lean back into whenever I need to keep going in the inevitable ups and downs of starting and growing a new business.
Excellent. And I remember that day on stage, and I'll never forget it. It was so powerful. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for sharing that story with us now. Again, going in reverse order. Well, Sharon, what was your wow moment? The thing that changed the trajectory of your career and your personal journey?
Oh, there are so many.
I know, but I'm going to challenge you to one.
One of them that I'll go back to this day after the ODAC meeting, when you think that your company may not make it, that we are not going to get the FDA approval, and we need to make sure that we can get to the next milestone. And I went back to the office, and I think we talked here about sharing. I think Linda said sharing progress with the team, so they know where we are. So we always try to do that. We get on the video with our 200 and something employee at the time, and we explained to them, and it was really like a physical and virtual, depends where the employee were, hug that we got. And it was, we are here, we are not going anywhere, we will continue to work with you. We believe in the mission, we believe in the drug, we believe in the science, and we will continue to work with you. And we believe in the mission, we believe in the drug, we believe in the science, and we will continue to work with you. We believe in the mission, we believe in the drug, we believe in the science, and we will continue to work with you. We believe in the mission, we believe in the drug, we believe in the science, and we will continue to work with you. We believe in the mission, we believe in the drug, we believe in the science, and we will continue to work with you. We believe in the mission, we believe in the drug, we believe in the science, and we will continue to work with you. We believe in the mission, we believe in the drug, we believe in the science, and we will continue to work with you. We believe in the mission, we believe in the drug, we believe in the science, and we will continue to work with you. We believe in the mission, we believe in the drug, we believe in the science, and we will continue to work with you. We believe in the mission, we believe in the drug, we believe in the science, and we and we will all together find a way. And it's those moments that help you go through some of the big hurdles that we have so many of them in drug development.
Thank you. Linda, your turn.
So again, this has been thought provocative for me. I guess, as I mentioned, sort of my journey was a little bit non-traditional. I didn't have a business background. I was a scientist by training and founded the company sort of on practical basis, and then ran it sort of on a practical basis. And it came time where we felt that the best way to grow this company would be as a public company. Regenerative medicine was, again, really having trouble raising venture capital money. And, the board had sat down with me and said, okay, you're going to be the transitional CEO, has become a public company. And, I heard all the horrors of being a public company CEO, how everything you say is, recorded and the non-material or the material, non-public disclosures. And I mean, literally it was, boot camp of fear. And I said I was going to try it. And I went to New York for my first non-deal roadshow, where you go basically to meet investors. And I guess that was a wow moment for me as I walked down the streets of New York, just absolutely in love sort of with the concept of business and building this company and talking to these investors and sort of playing that bantering game with those people that I thought were so smart and so insightful and so successful. And sort of like, here I am, I can do this. And I guess that was one of those, banner moments. And now I've been running this company as a public company, I guess, for 8 years. And I feel pretty competent to run a public company now. And I never would have thought that 20 years ago. So there we are.
Fantastic. Kathy, take us home.
Okay. So mine was when my identical twin sister was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. So, I mean, for all those years, she was my co-founder. Of course, we, looked over her shoulder and thought, would she get multiple myeloma? And then shock of shocks, she got stage 3 breast cancer. And then, of course, we realized in our family, our grandfather had myeloma, our grandmother had breast cancer. But at the same time, I was also taking care of my mom, who had melanoma, and my dad died of renal cell carcinoma very young. So basically, my sister and I came to the realization that our family has some pretty lousy genes. And on my husband's side, it's more on the neurology side. And so when I got the call from the Dean Noria of Harvard Business School, asking if I would come up to the business school and work together with Robert and Jonathan Kraft, which we all know for the New England Patriots, in this field of precision medicine, it was an aha moment for me to think this is the greatest opportunity I could have to share knowledge across so many diseases. And I have to say, looking back, it was an amazing time with incredible leaders. Dean Noria was a huge supporter of women and nonprofits. I hope Harvard Business School continues to do that type of work. And I would say working with Robert and Jonathan Kraft was a great gift. And I think their investment was one of the best investments ever made across all diseases. I'm not even sure they realized the impact of it all. And so I think now we can look back and say, there's a way for every rare disease, for every nonprofit, for everybody to go in and get started. And the aha moment for me is you shouldn't have to wait, for a death sentence. You shouldn't have to wait for something to happen to you. If you believe you want to work in healthcare, if you believe you want to have a purpose for whatever reason, don't wait, just go, get started, move, be an entrepreneur. And you're not going to get it right. You're definitely not going to get it right, but you will have time to refocus and change. But I would say looking back, there's no better place to be than feeling like you're changing patients' lives or getting those emails, which I'm sure everybody on this podcast, on this webinar has, which is, you saved my life. You bought me time. You let me see that wedding or that graduation. That is the greatest gift you can ever have in a job.
And that's the power of what you all do. I say it all the time that you all are very talented women and you have a lot of smarts and you can use your talents in almost any other industry. But yet you decided you're going to dedicate your resources and your time and your energies and your brain power to improving the lives of patients. And that's truly a gift for all of us. So thank you for all that you do for all of the patients out there. It's quite remarkable. I'd like to ask you all one of the questions that's come in through the feed, if you don't mind. And that is, as serial entrepreneurs, what does your next venture look like? And do you have it in you for another venture? Wendy, I'll let you kick it off. You just started another one.
I did. My latest company is also in the rare disease space. Our big goal is focused around access to therapies. As we've learned this year, diseases are global, and patients around the world are going to do whatever they can to help themselves and their children. RareiTi is a global managed access company. So managed access is a broad term for several regulatory pathways that are used to provide access to unapproved therapies. So if you think about it, it first came into broad use after the AIDS epidemic, and now really is a consideration for any company developing a novel therapy, because patients are going to be calling you and asking you have to think it through. And we think that at RareiTi, that we can innovate the managed access model to combine the patient advocacy, patient engagement, and ability to collect the patient experience data that Sharon was talking about. And so at the point of care, we've developed a platform where patients can easily, in their own language, with local support, accessible. They can log a few pieces of data every day, and over time they can see how they're doing, and they can also have access to support. And then the data collected, they can then be used to better target future clinical trials, understand barriers to adherence, and broaden the data sets from a global perspective. So anyway, that's it. Equitable access for patients.
Before we got started on the panel, we had a little bit of a conversation, and Kathy, you brought up that entrepreneurs often have 500 million ideas floating around in their head, and the challenge is to focus on one or two of them. So I'll hand it to you. What's next? You've already done this, and that. So,
well, I would say anybody that works with me will tell you that is what happens with me, and you do need somebody that's beside you, kind of prioritizing and making sure that you have so many ideas, which is most important. I would say immediately on the communication side, not the company side, but is actually what I have observed is it doesn't matter what the disease is. It doesn't matter whether it's Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or Duchenne's or something like that. For these patients and their families, getting through this broken system is so overwhelming, and simplifying it like any other shopping experience that we have. Like, we would not put up with this if we were shopping on Amazon. So understanding the communication and how to help patients and their families, kind of beat the broken system is one thing really important to me. And then I think along the way, there is going to be a number of really interesting startups in the direct-to-patient space that I would love to be part of, because I do think that the power will start to shift. And I think patients are going to start to understand the power of their samples and their data and being part of a cure, and what they should expect in return for that.
Agreed. And that's going to lead us into a whole other area of data privacy. Who owns that data? And that's a conversation that could take us for 3 more hours. So we'll leave that teaser right there. So
anybody that wants to join me, raise a hand. We'll just do it together from here.
Love it. You're already like at the second part of your journey with your company. So where do you go?
So, it's really interesting. I sort of look at it as, going to the higher order. So when I am done with biotech, which I don't know exactly when that will be, I really would like to do something for women. I was actually talking to my daughter last night. She would be the 3rd generation of working women in our family. My mother worked, I worked, and now she is a mother working. And yet we have done nothing to really improve how childcare is delivered to our little ones, and how women sort of go through work-life balance and actually can enjoy their careers and enjoy their families. And so for me, after this, I'll probably, climb up onto the bully pulpits and start working on something that will make, hopefully, maybe the 4th generation in my family of working women have an easier path to having the most incredible joy in the world, which is being a mother, and also, the second most incredible joy in the world, which is having a fulfilling career.
Mm-hmm. So when you get ready for that, I'll bring my hammer and nails and I'll help you build that pulpit, okay?
Thank you.
Sharon, I'll let you have the last word because we're nearing the end of our time, unfortunately, but we will be able to go and continue our conversation in the lounge. So Sharon?
So I have 2 areas that are very important for me. One is the process. Why does it take 10 years to develop a drug? And why does it take close to $1 billion, which at the end of the day ends up with the price of drugs? And I think we know us went through the process, what is broken in the system, how can we make it better. If you think about it, if you want to help a child that is born with a disease, he's 10 by the time that we actually get the drug approved. If we have a patient that has a few months to live, we can think about how many patients will die before we get the drug to market. We have to change some of the fundamentals on the way we do things in order to facilitate this process. And I definitely want to be part of that. And the second part, as I mentioned, I really want to go back and try to do something in Alzheimer's disease.
Well, and please do, because we know what we need for everything. I can't thank you all enough for being part of this energizing panel. Thank you to our attendees. Thank you to our other WoW podcast attendees who joined us. And thank you to our sponsors, BioForum, Greenfire, Karyopharm, W2O, and WCG. Before we head over to the lounge, and that's just easy enough to do, is to click on the icon as at the top of your toolbar. I'd like to leave you with a closing thought from Ruth Porat, the CFO of Alphabet. And that is, stick to your true north, build greatness for the long term. And that's what you all have done. And I love your ideas and your innovations and your thoughts on how to fix this broken system that we all love, but we know needs help. So thank you so much for being part of our WoW virtual panel. And I look forward to seeing you in the lounges. Thank you.
Thank you.